Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Garden Cinema. Thank you so much for being so numerous tonight. A couple more people coming in. So this is the latest in a series of industry panel events we've been hosting for our members. And they've been proving popular, so we're carrying on with them. We've had so far festivals, how to get your film in festivals. We've had documentary filmmaking. We've had film journalism. We've had feature film producing. So the aim of these events are very much to shed light on a particular aspect of the industry that many of you are interested in. So it's very informal, and the purpose is very much for you to ask questions you have, anything you want to know from professionals with years of experience in their fields. So this evening, the focus is on costume design and costume supervising, shall I say. So I'm delighted to greet our guests who have very kindly agreed to join us tonight. Charlotte Finlay, costume supervisor, and Joanna Johnston, costume designer. Thank you very much. Big round of applause. So I'll just have a few questions for you and then I'll open it up to the audience because the most important thing really is you guys out there. So the first thing I'm interested really in is just knowing a bit about you individually, how you got to where you are today, how you got to practice in this industry. So Charlotte, do you want to kick off?
Okay, does this work like this? Yes. I started by being very interested in making clothes and costume as a child, dressing up, making clothes for my dolls, things like that. And then much later on, I got a job on a project for TV as just a costume person who dresses crowd, who dresses actors. And so I did that for a while. And then, it's very echoey. And then gradually I got rather tired of dressing people and I progressed to supervising. A costume designer called Jill Taylor gave me the opportunity to supervise Johnny English 1, which I did with her. And she came from the BBC where the designers did a lot themselves, including budgeting, and there weren't really supervisors in those days. Lots of projects in England just had assistant designers and they really did everything themselves. But gradually, with sort of the influence of American films, American movie making, supervisors have become more and more prevalent in bigger films anyway. And so I went on from there and didn't stop supervising, and I haven't stopped working apart from COVID and the strikes since then, really. Yeah. So yeah. So it's there aren't very many supervisors, not enough supervisors, and actually I am part of a small group. This isn't an advertisement because there's no room, but we are giving a couple of courses in supervising through Screen Skills at the moment. So because there isn't really somewhere to learn it, you learn it really on the job, but we have tried to condense it into a sort of a 4-day course that can give people a good idea of what you need to do and how to do it.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to come on to the technicality of the job itself and what you do practically. Joanna, just could you tell us a bit more about how
less of a plan on my end, just it more or less happened. I wanted to do fashion, and I opened a door there and it didn't really work, and then I closed it pretty quickly. And then I sort of fell into the costume world and went to work in a costume house, and I met Tom Rand, who's here today, who became one of my 2 mentors, designers, him and Anthony Powell. So I worked in a costume house, then got picked up, first of all, actually, by Tom, and then went into film as a, junior to the designer. And that was it, really. So just default and no plan.
I actually did also work in a costume house for a couple of years.
Complete starter question: what's a costume house?
Oh, costume rental house. So where they sell or they rent out and make costumes for film and TV and theatre and opera and everything. So I can't remember where did you? I worked at Cosprop.
I was in Birmingham.
and Nathan's. There you go.
Thank you very much. So practically, you both have different roles. If you don't mind talking us through what you do day to day, what does it mean to be a costume supervisor and a costume designer on set?
Well, I'll say it from mine. A costume designer is responsible for the look, and they are often wayward creatures, and have no concept about time and deliveries and things. So that's why we need a supervisor, because the supervisor, herds us into some kind of order, and they're absolutely crucial. And there's sort of the architecture of it, and I would say Charlotte is particularly brilliant at her job, and that make sure that we are delivering what we're meant to be delivering on time, on budget. And she's very much the sort of the go-between between production and the designer to make sure that the production are getting what they want from us and the director, and all the sort of add-ons like stunts and doubles and things. There's so many moving parts. So in simple terms, I would say supervisor is very much logistics and responsible for all the staff and everything, and then the designer is responsible for the look. But they very much are hand in hand. They have to work, we have to work really closely, and it's probably the closest relationship in the costume department, I would say. Say that?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you have to get on pretty well because you spend a lot of hours together, and you have to sort of try to see things in the same way. And although I do, yes, have to crack the whip sort of time-wise and schedule-wise, but I mean, it's definitely a collaboration. And although my role is logistics, I like to feel that I have some kind of creative overview and input, which I'm lucky enough to use with the designers I work with. Not every supervisor is like that. But
yeah, I would second that. Charlotte is very creative actually as well. Sorry,
there are a few of us who are
yes,
creative.
and I will often use her as a bouncing board as regards to certain things. So to have that sounding board, it's really important.
Well, that's it. I was going to ask if, as costume supervisor, sometimes the logistics that you oversee had an incidence on the changing look of the costume. If some of the ambitions, I guess, behind the costume just couldn't be met because of the logistical elements. So the costume
that
design
happens quite a lot, particularly with stunts, I would say. It's the main flaw in the sort of fly in the ointment when you're trying to design something beautiful and somehow you've got to fit a harness and pads and God knows what on a stunt double or an actress, which can really ruin the costume. I mean, or it looks like that anyway. Yeah, we have to try and make it still work and look lovely. Yeah, we've had a few times like that. Yeah.
So I don't know if either of you wants to answer that. Can you talk us through the life of a costume, I guess, from the very inception of the idea through to execution? For example, you, Joanna, as costume designer, how much say do you get in the look you want? How do you work, I guess, with the director's vision?
Yeah, I mean, there's no sort of set formula about filmmaking. No day is ever the same. No film is ever the same. So your starting point is always the script. So that creates the creation of what you feel is right to help tell the story through costumes. So you do the design. If it's obviously this is talking about a film which is mostly being created and made. So you do design, then you get the fabrics, and then Charlotte and I have budgeted. We we've already done the budget, so we then have to make sure that what I'm asking for ideally can fall into that line of what we've set down on the financial thing. And then it's process. Yes, I mean, it's just like making any bit of clothing. You get fabrics, you dye them, you print them, then you work with the workroom, then you do fittings, and you change it, and then you do more fittings, and and the director so going back to what you were saying, it's a three-way stretch really. It's the director and the actor and the designer. So it's the designer's vision, interpreting what the director wants, but then the actor often has, sometimes quite strong opinions. So, so you have to, pull that in. So it's like a, mashup, obviously, sometimes of, these different heads. But in the end, each designer will do the design for the same script and the same story in a completely different way. It's what you think is right, what I do, what Charlotte would do, be possibly two totally different things in concept, and that's what's interesting, isn't it? You've got that tool to be able to create something which is just your vision for that moment, and you have to work very quickly, so you can't sort of ponder, with a pen and piece of paper for days on end. So you just have to work from your gut, really.
Thank you very much. Charlotte, do you want to add anything?
No, I was just going to say, and I mean, for many aspiring costume designers, it can be quite frustrating. I mean, the reality of it is that there's a lot of compromise involved in the design of costume because of all those other aspects that you have to take into account. And it's not just making lovely things that you'd like to, there are many other people you have to consider, and it's not always that easy. And sometimes you have to start again the next day, or overnight for the next day. It can be very challenging.
I think every aspect of filmmaking is about compromise, and I think we getting to where we've been in the industry is actually recognizing the compromises, because in the early days you get really depressed and sad, and you kind of go, can't have this, and you really wanted this, and you can't have it, and there's no money, and the actor doesn't like it, whatever. And actually what's great is when you become a grown-up, then you can you're much more able to adapt and shift and change, and hopefully still get it in some way where you want it to be, but it's never perfect. It's never perfect because you never have the money or the time to be able to create perfection, so it's a bit like a game show, actually.
And you need to be incredibly flexible, and flexibility is hugely important.
What preconceptions of your respective roles have you come across? Preconceived ideas of what your role entails. Have you?
Well, I think Charlotte probably agree with me because we talk about it a lot. But I think my summary is that everybody gets dressed in the morning. So, most people get dressed. So, therefore, how difficult is it to do costumes in a film? It's just putting clothes on, but it's actually incredibly complex because you're telling the story of these people through the lens, and there's so many parts to every, one look, all these moving items. And I think that I do sometimes say this to directors occasionally, is that not everybody designs a room and builds a room to live in. So it's a little bit further away, whereas putting clothes on is very near and should be kind of simple. So I think there's a sort of expectation about costumes in film that it's not really very complicated. But what's so funny is when people come into the costume department and they realise what we do, they're absolutely sort of gobsmacked because it's so complex, and the craft work that goes into it, and the detail, and everybody doing extraordinary work. So I think it's perceived as being simple, but in fact it's not at all. you agree with that?
Yes, I think, and I mean, as from my point of view, my side of it, I don't think anybody has any idea about what is behind the costume designer and his or her team, and the infrastructure required to produce costumes for a film or TV. I mean, it's enormous now, and it's bigger and bigger, and loads of admin, and I mean.
So
it's
Charlotte and I did the last Indiana Jones, and just for example, there was one point, and Zoe can back us up here, that we were prepping in London, we were prepping in Sicily, we were shooting in Morocco, and we were shooting in Scotland, all at the same time. So for Charlotte, that's all separate crews, all the logistics of all the right costumes being at the right place at the right time. So second unit was establishing costumes for principals before they'd put them on themselves. So that was a pretty good example of how complex the logistics can be, and how somebody of Charlotte's expertise only somebody like her could actually manage that.
Actually, I have a question following on that. This may be a silly question, but do you oversee the shipping of the costumes from one location? You don't adapt. The costumes aren't obviously made in the location where some of the...
They could be.
And
in fact, we did make some in Morocco, didn't we?
We
used, because we have some good people there who could help us and make local things as well. And but yes, we ship, and in fact, Zoe has to do a lot of the shipping mainly. But yeah, we have to ship, and we were shipping to Morocco and then to Sicily, and then from Sicily to Morocco, and then I mean, it was hellish, actually, really, to be honest. And it's all very nerve-wracking that things are going to arrive in the right place at the right time and get stuck in. Things get stuck in customs. I mean, all sorts of things happen. It's really quite terrifying. Trucks catch fire with costumes in them. I mean, all sorts of things happen. It's really,
Wow, I hadn't thought of that dimension at all. I'm gonna. Actually, my first question is an audience question, but it's a young lady who couldn't be here with us today. She's the daughter of a member, and I wrote down her question so I didn't get it wrong. Her question is, what's the most proud you've ever been of achieving something that looked amazing on a low budget? And that's Jasmine 14. Thank you, Jasmine, for the question.
Sorry.
We don't do low budget.
Blank.
No, I mean, it's a difficult question, actually. I mean...
Yeah, it's quite tricky, that.
I guess it's define low, but
yes,
maybe
well,
in
exactly.
a reasonable...
I mean, it's... I mean, I've worked on Mike Leigh films, which are very low budget compared to some of the other things I've done since then, and they have always been amazing. I mean, I worked on Topsy Turvy and Vera Drake, which were designed by Lindy Hemming and Jacqueline Durran, but they were really on a shoestring probably, but good period shows done as well as we could. I mean, yeah.
How about you, Joanna? Does any examples spring to mind?
I'm slightly blanking, sorry. I think the only thing I would say is, I think what's really fun about film and costume is that you do all this work and you're sort of going quite fast speed, and then it all somehow always pulls together, but you never know how it is ever, because it's sort of 10 o'clock the night before, you're still working on it. And then it goes onto the actor, onto the set, and then that character going within the set is always really exciting, and it never fails to, kind of catch your breath that you've actually managed to get that person in the right clothing, in the right look, on the right day, hopefully looking all right.
And what really, I often think of how, you get to that point and it's been a terrible struggle to get there, and then suddenly everything's lifted and it's all happened and it's over. And I mean, just maybe one costume or, several costumes or a big scene or something. And then you're already moving on to the next thing, but you're relieved because you've achieve this thing which you really didn't think you could, you know, and that's a great feeling.
It makes sense. Thank you. Right, I will now open it up to the floor, so to speak. Do we have questions in our audience? We've got a roving mic, which will come to you. The first one's... I was going to say the first one's tricky, but actually it's already a hand in. Yes, fourth row.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting. I'd sort of start this by saying I'm a total novice on any of this, so please excuse if my question is a bit strange. But I'm sort of fascinated as a layperson about the awards for costume design. And I'll give you an example that I just couldn't understand it. So you've got the Shape of Water, and then you've got a Phantom Thread. And, you know, I'm thinking to myself, I mean, yeah, okay, I do PR for films and stuff, but I'm talking about general PR. And I just thought to myself, I just don't understand it, because to me, watching The Shape of Water, I thought, my golly, doing those costumes must have been absolutely incredible. Whereas Phantom Thread, in my ignorance, I thought, well, you know, you could just be a tailor and pull that off, if you see what I mean. So I just wondered whether you had any thoughts about, you know, or in information you could give us on the process or how it's decided or any of this.
I don't. It's difficult to comment on something like that, to be honest with you, because, you know, every year is different, and I don't think I'd particularly want to comment about one particular film. So
yeah, I mean, I think the awards process is quite it's not random, but it's very difficult to understand sometimes what comes through, and you know, I don't know. it's beyond our remit, I'm afraid. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense sometimes. Yeah, depends who's voting and how, and yeah.
Hi, again, I'm a complete novice, like this lady behind me. I was just, when you were saying that actors actually have a say in this, I'm quite surprised about that, because I thought the actors would just turn up and you could just put anything on them that, you know.
If only.
They had to work with that. I mean, does it depend if it's a big name actor? Because I imagine extras have no say at all. But so what's the politics of that?
well, yes, extras. Yes, they're not allowed to say anything. No,
they're not allowed to mirror.
But actors, they don't. No, it depends. Everybody's different, and some actors have some really interesting character points, which are lovely to bring to the table. Others come with a total blank piece of paper, and they just lay themselves in your hands and you know, let you run with it. I mean, I think, yeah, everybody's different, and sometimes vanity can come into it, and they might think that what they think is right might be for them in their life, but it doesn't actually particularly work on the platform, because, you know, we're looking at everybody in that one scene and they may be just looking at themselves. So but yeah, it's different, and every time, yeah, sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not so great. But you have to work with it, and as you say, depending on their caliber and whether we have to, as a designer particularly, we have to gain the actor's trust, and I think that's the key. So, you know, you've got to see if you can pull them over to your way of thinking of what you think is the right thing to do, having had those discussions with the director. So, yeah, every case is different, but it's interesting you're surprised.
Compromise. Well, my cousin is an actress, and she says, actually, it's really good if you get the right corset, because then you're forced to walk in a period style. So she says it's almost as if the costume is directing you how to walk in that particular period. So she's kind of grateful for that. Thank you.
So you mentioned like having to deal with harnesses and props for the actors who you're catering the costume to, but did you have a specific time that you were really proud of, a moment where you thought it would be difficult to make a specific costume, but then you made it in the end?
What proud of a particular piece
Yeah,
of
like
work
adapting
where you made it work.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I think so.
we're
Charlotte and I
both thinking the same thing, aren't we?
if we're in tune. So
Yeah.
we did Mission Impossible
Yeah.
5, and I did this sort of quite glam evening dress for Rebecca Ferguson, and she had to sort of be grabbed by Tom Cruise and then floated down the outside of the Opera House in Vienna, and so
It was a
one shoulder dress, and so
figure hugging.
yeah, exactly. So I think that if you look at it, and also it's a good question you asked, because I changed I exaggerated the dress for that drop. So I made the train much longer and made it a little bit more dramatic. And so you can do things like that. You can tweak for a stunt in the design. So to all intents and purposes, it looks like it's the same dress, but in fact you've made it bigger, wider, longer, and these sort of things. But yes, I would say
yes, that was an achievement.
That look is a good look over a harness.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had to work on a very fast and a quick time frame. What are the time frames that you're working with? If from the start of a production and the start of the design to the making of costumes?
We have between, I would say on average, 3 to 4 months to prep a film. That's from the minute, the button gets pressed and you start.
Yeah, for a big movie.
Start
yeah.
from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So,
but you might not have much information at the very beginning, and you might not have casting either.
No, you may not have actors.
Most
so
likely. Yeah.
you can be going a lot, long way, a bit in the blind. But you start the process. But then you're working designing and making all the way through shooting, because you're just one step ahead of the shooting schedule, and 2, they change things quite a lot now.
Yeah, I think that's something that people don't understand, actually, even in film, that you don't have all the costumes on the first day of shooting at all.
Like the opposite
you have
of theatre.
the costume for that first day or that first week if you're lucky, but you keep working all the way through right till the last minute. I mean,
you sometimes get cast coming in 2 days. You're given a cast 2 days before they shoot, and it's necessary to make their costume, and so you're working like that. You're working at great speed.
Sometimes
Lots
over
of
the
coffee.
weekend, fitting in hotels. Working overnight. There's a lot of that happens actually.
We had a question, I think, just in front. Yes.
Hello. Was there anybody maybe early on in your career that you took inspiration from, that you that really stood out?
Well, I think all costume designers I know are obsessed by the leopard, and you just look at a film like that and just sort of drool in wonder. So seeing a film like that, for sure, that pushed my button.
I don't know if I was really inspired by anything particular, because I didn't take a creative path, but I saw a lot of theatre and a lot of film as a child and teenager, and I don't know, it all made sense to me to take that route.
Thanks. I have no idea of the process either, but to what extent do you think the directors and the script writers, etc., have a view of the clothes their characters are wearing, and how do you get to the point that they're dressed, kind of conceptually?
So how much does the director influence the character, the look of the character?
Do you think most of them have a view of what their characters are wearing?
Again, every director's different. I mean, Charlotte and I were talking about a director earlier today, and I had an interview with him, and he was really specific, and he was sort of saying, "Oh, in this scene, I want a pink dress with, frill at the bottom," and it was really, very, very, very specific, and that's, in my experience, it's unusual. I like working with directors who are a bit more sort of abstract. They might say, "Oh, I want her to look really sexy in this scene," or "I want him to look, adventurous, it's sort of more in adjectives like that. And then it's easier in a way, because then you can run with that yourself. If they're very, very particular, then you've got a smaller window to fit yourself into. Every director's different. Every director's different. And it also depends on whether it's contemporary to period, because contemporary everybody knows about, and a director may say, oh yeah, he's wearing 501 jeans, Levi's, for this, that's what he should wear for that. So that's easy. But if you're doing a film which is 1820s or something, he may know, but he may not know, and so therefore you may get a longer reign as a designer, potentially, because a lot of designers have historical knowledge, and they would be 10 steps ahead on the dress of the day than the director might be.
I actually have a question about that. To what extent do you work as designers with researchers, historians, people that might be experts in the country or the era that you're filming in?
Well, it's everything. Is the information what you need is totally valuable, but in every film you learn a lot. In fact, Charlotte and I, the last film we did together last year, had a particular tribe of indigenous Americans, and we sought counsel, because it's it's really, I've only done sort of Western type Indians before in 1950s, so this was meant to be very authentic, and we spent quite a lot of time researching and getting people to advise us about how it would be. It was in the early 1600s, so it was very specific, and you're very dependent on knowledge, historical knowledge.
Thank you. Do we have other questions? Oh, we've got loads. I saw a hand there. I'm trying to be as fair as possible in terms of timing. There. We'll go semicircle. Oh, I didn't even see you. Oh no, you weren't even in my calculations.
How dare you?
Oh dear, okay, I'm so sorry.
Hi, I'm. Is that too loud? Currently working in a costume house, just over 2 years, and I'm getting a little sick of it. No offense to them, hopefully none of them are here. But I was wondering how long you both worked in one, what it did for you, and how you moved on to the next stage.
Well, I was at Cosprop for 2 years, and I'd had enough by then as well. But also, I don't think I'm cut out for kind of 9 to 5, and that's what it is really. And I needed more money, and so I mean, the benefit was meeting a huge amount of people who I then went on to work with and for. So I met a lot of assistant designers who are now designers, and designers who employed me almost straight away, and I never stopped working actually once I'd left. I mean, never looked for work. So I learned a lot. I mean, I didn't study, I didn't do any degree. So I learned a lot about historical costume and how the film industry works and how it uses costume houses. And so it was a great training, and it is a really good place to start, I think.
Yes, I completely agree. I think I was 19 when I went to work in a costume house, and I thought it was utterly brilliant. I was like a sort of magic box. I had no idea. And I met some great designers, including Tom Rand, and that introduction led me. So Tom came in as a designer to source costumes, and that interaction led me to assisting him in the future. So it's the same 2 years. I think that's a sort of good time frame, and but it was incredibly informative, I must say, and great for connections. And these brilliant designers came in, and you were sort of in awe of them, really. It's a very good starting point.
Hi, my question is I'm sure like it's a pretty extensive process, and you guys seem to have like different ranges of films that you've worked on. What is kind of the process for you to pick which film that you'll work on? And then also what kind of insight do you have of the overall story before you like, I guess, agreed to work on a project?
I didn't get that last bit, but you basically pick the film that you worked on from this. Well, for me, I think it's the script, then it's the director, and then who's in it. It's sort of in that order, but they all could be equal as well. So that's if the script, catches your fancy. I always find if I keep putting the script down, that's with a physical script, obviously. If you keep on putting it down and making a cup of tea or something, maybe it's not such a great film. But if it it's like a good book. If it gets you by the throat and you can't put it down, then I think that's the one to do. And then you go through the process of, then you meet the director, and then if he likes you or she likes you and you like them, then that's good. What was the second part of it?
It was about reading the script. I mean, it was sort of, I sort of come next, I suppose. So usually I choose the jobs to do with the designer who might ask me to work for them. And then generally, if they're designers I like working with, they'll have chosen a good script and a good director. And so it goes from there.
Yes, and sort of at the same time, you're often asking roughly what the budget might be. They'll tell you what the budget of the film is. Then, then I would obviously then go to Charlotte and say, look, well, they're thinking of X. Do you think we can do something like this for X? So then, very dependent on her opinion as regards to if it's feasible or not. Because no point in a, glorious, huge, great thing. To be executed for no money.
Yeah, there are lots of things
difficult.
to weigh up, really. I mean, sometimes I will advise somebody not to do it if it's really unfeasible. I mean, I had to turn down a job with a designer recently it was a great job, but it just didn't have the money, and it was all away and out of England. And, there are many things you have to weigh up and see whether it works as a whole.
Hi, so I'm currently training as a tailor in a costume house, and I'm just wondering what sort of advice you would give to sort of myself and my colleagues at an early stage of our career in a time that can feel a bit uncertain, sort of with AI and sort of with these things happening kind of around us. Yeah, just generally what kind of advice?
Well, AI is an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm not very good at career advice, but I think, tailoring is a brilliant skill, and I love working with tailors. So I'm going to just say that. The industry is, it's in a sort of complicated thing at the moment. I mean, I'm a great believer that I think the AI, I'm not worried about it. I was lucky enough to work with a director called Bob Zemeckis, who was always cutting edge of technology, and when CGI work started to come in, and he was way ahead, and we were doing these things before other people. When CGI came in, people were going, they're not going to need costume designers, it's all just going to be done digitally, and we're all going to be redundant. But actually, interesting enough is I've been lucky actually with Charlotte as well on quite a lot of films, is that the CGI team really want physical. So even if it's going into the mash of being done by the computer, they actually want a physical garment. So I've done quite a lot of work which is designing and making, and then it's created digitally. So I feel we're still fine at the moment, and I don't think we're suddenly going to be shoved away. I think there's room for everybody in all worlds at this time. Optimistic.
Charlotte, did you want to add anything? Sorry.
No, I'd just say that there's always room for tailors, because there aren't enough tailors, and keep learning the skills and perfecting the skills. But if you're in a costume house, maybe good to stay there for a bit. I mean, work's picking up, but it's slow. Yeah.
We have, I think, another few questions there.
Hi. I was wondering, over the course of your careers, what would you say is kind of the biggest or the most significant difference between the way that costume interplays with film production when you started your career and where film production is now, if any?
Well, I think probably from my point of view, it goes back to the last question. I think the technical side is, with CGI is probably the biggest thing now. I mean, the sad side of it is that you could design a whole costume and put it live up onto an actor, and then in post they could turn it into something completely different without, a buy or leave to you. So we, as creators in costume, I think we have, I would say, less control, maybe. I think the classic thing is they do poster shoots for publicity, and you see often it's not that your costume looks completely different on the poster shoot than it did in reality. So there is, for me, there's a little bit of a sense that you, definitely have less control. But I suppose you just have to try and dock yourself into people who would keep the respect going that, to keep your creativity as you want. I think that the other process, which probably Charlotte it's quicker. We have less time. We have more people being impatient and more last minute things. So where you could spend a bit of time doing a really, intricate design, you've got to cut a lot of corners now. So
yeah, I was going to say, I think what's really different is the size of the department, even on something smaller, and also all the technology in terms of mobile phones and computers and emails and everything. When we started, we didn't have that. And so it meant people couldn't contact you late at night and tell you about something that's happening tomorrow, and you just had to come in the next day and deal with it, and nobody expected you to answer an email at midnight, or we get call sheets every day before we shoot for the next day, and they, in particular on Mission, for example, we were getting them at midnight for the next morning and expecting changes, and you're just expected to deal with it because you can. And that's hugely different, I think. I think that's really changed the speed and and just the expectation of everybody just to jump to it all the time.
Hello. Just thinking about period productions and authenticity. Do you often use vintage and period fabrics and accessories to give that authenticity, and also so that things don't look as though they're being worn for the first time by a character, for example? Because often on screen, things all look sort of fresh and clean and new, which doesn't quite wash actually sometimes as a viewer, because everything is so sort of pristine.
Yes. I mean, yes, and Joanna's one who particularly enjoys using vintage pieces and accessories and fabrics. But yes, I mean, I think most designers would, and they will always research. And if they can't use the original piece, they might have it copied or printed if they have to make a bigger garment or several garments in the same fabric and don't have enough. And hopefully, I mean, everyone I work with pays a great deal of attention to how it looks on screen, and that it shouldn't look new, that it needs to be distressed or broken down, as we call it, and made to look as if it's a natural wear or whatever it's supposed to look like. So yes, we definitely use all of that, all of those skills and things.
So in the theatre, you often have to think a bit about the lighting and the fabrics, and that goes together, and you have to have certain colour schemes. Do you have the same type of issue in regards to filmmaking?
Yes, so I like to work with the lighting cameraman. So he's designing the lighting. So you need to find out how they're shooting it and what, sometimes it'll be in warm tones, sometimes it'll be cool. And so you find that out early days. And then you also can do camera tests on fabrics. If there's something I'm not entirely sure about, either color or texture, we can do quick camera tests and see how that looks. So yes, everything can shift from reality onto when you get onto the set, for sure, and the way they light it.
And
so
the art department as well.
and then the art
colours.
department. Yeah, I'm working with the art department. Actually, my first point of call is, after Charlotte, is the art department, because they're creating the frame of the person who you're designing for, and so you work very, very closely with the art department, the set deck. So if you want, it's a red room, say, do you want the person to stand out or disappear, or, so you're push-pulling. It's a bit like cooking, push-pulling all the time to, lift up, pull back, all that sort of thing, Does that make sense?
I think we've got time for one more question. We have one last question. A hand on the third row.
I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about the interplay between your department and hair and makeup. Do you design the costume first? And do they then design the look?
It's
or have you designed a sleek outfit and they've come up with a bouffant, hideous thing? And how do you, who has precedence? Is that you overrule them? Or
good question. Yeah, it's basically the costume designer comes on before hair and makeup, but so you have the costume designer's sort of overall look, and then you work hand in hand with hair and makeup. So if you have ideas, you can say, what about, and but it's always about balance. You need to make sure everything is in harmony with hair and makeup and costume. And in Italy, and the sort of old-fashioned way is that the costume designer designed the hair and makeup. That's the old school way, and in Italy they still do that, actually. So Charlotte and I worked in a film in Rome once, and it was just extraordinary because they were just absolutely wanting you to take the lead. But it's often you see in films sometimes where the hat and the hair are not in harmony, and so that so
yes,
try and
can
get
be a bit
around
of friction, I'd say, between hair and makeup and costume.
can I just sneak one more in quickly? Have you were talking about the trucks burning down when you're trying to get costume. Have you ever been in a situation where you're on set and your costumes aren't, and they're ready to shoot and actors are there, and what do you do?
Well, I think we wouldn't be on set. We'd be calling. I mean that we'd have told them already. I mean, the best thing is to be honest, and there's no point in just pretending it's going to be okay. And I can't think of a situation at this minute, but the main thing is to just, as soon as there's a problem, then you contact the people in charge and you say, look, this is the situation, and that you're doing your best, and so they will try and work around it. But generally it just doesn't happen. I mean, it really doesn't. We just will make sure it doesn't happen.
Wonderful. Well, one more. We've got one more. Amazing. Yes.
Thank you. Just to go to a micro level, I'm interested in texture and fabrics that you use and how they appear on the camera, and how you pick your fabrics to be photogenic.
Texture and fabrics, and how do you choose your fabrics to be photogenic on screen?
I think I just choose what I like, I suppose. I mean, it's just instinctive. You probably don't overthink it too much, but you might just be drawn to something heavy texture, density, reflection. It'll be
depends what you're making.
Yes,
as
it
well.
just depends what you're making. Do you want sexy, slinky? Do you want muffled up, woolly? Do you want, it's just each piece is a different story, and you go through crushes of fabrics, so you go into a silk fi crush or something, and taffeta crush.
It's
and
in all your
you do
films.
loads of that.
Yeah.
Right. We can wrap up. Thank you so much, everyone, for your very, very interesting questions, very informative answers. Thank you so much to our guests. Joanna and Charlotte, please be a big round of applause. Thank you very much.